Okay, so we'll start at 7 o'clock, so that's about 5 more minutes. And this will just be our temporary start page. Okay, I'm just going to wait a couple more minutes because I want to make sure that anybody who wants to come comes into the session. And I just tweeted it again and sent it on Facebook. So we might catch a few more people just through those channels. And to the rest of you, as I said in the chat box, which is a little bit small, we've been having crazy technical difficulties with this room in the last half an hour. So we're going to try to do something a little bit unconventional with the webinar, which is to share my desktop. And that might cause a little bit of lag for some of you. But c'est la vie, technology. And we will also be recording the webinar, so hopefully that's okay with anyone. And anyone who is not okay with the webinar being recorded, then you can leave. Otherwise, we'll get started in just about 2 or 3 minutes, I think. In the meantime, I'm going to see if maybe I can get this chat room bigger. Now, I detached the chat room on my computer, but I'm not sure that did it for everyone. If it didn't detach it for everyone, I think you have the ability to move the windows around a little bit. So you can change your own view. Yeah, that's right, as Ben is saying. And you do that with the little drop-down box at the top right of each window. And if you click on that, you'll get a bunch of things like detach and so on. And it looks like you can just drag and drop, as Benjamin's saying as well. Hi, Joanne. Hi, Judy. Peter. Shuhei. Hello to all of you. I was going to ask where people were from, Ben, but when you log in, you have to say where you're from. I don't know, can everyone else see the city names beside the participant names? Most people are from Toronto, I imagine. Okay, well, it's 7:05, and I think to avoid things going too late, I'm going to get started. Now, what's going to happen with this webinar is I'm going to press record, and that should start the webinar to record. And then I'm going to share my desktop, which will probably slow things down a little bit. And I will turn off the video so that you can't see me anymore. And then you should be able to see my presentation through the application share. And I'll come back at the beginning just to make sure that you can see it, and then I'm going to switch over to my PowerPoint, and I probably won't be able to see you guys chatting. So even though I want to, I might not be able to catch all of your questions all of the time. So at the end, I will come back and take a look at the questions. So I'm going to press record now.
Recording started.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to welcome everybody to TESOL Toronto's webinar for August 1st. It is on globalizing the staff room, and my name is Tyson Seaburn. I'm the president of TESOL Toronto, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us in this nice Thursday evening. It's nice in Toronto, actually. The weather's quite beautiful. And although you're looking at a pretty dull screen right now, we will be getting to something a little bit more exciting. And I'm going to turn off my video now to hopefully increase bandwidth availability for many of you, and hopefully that won't slow things down too much. Hi. Okay, so I'm now going to the slideshow. Okay, so our webinar today is on globalizing the staff room, and its subtitle really is about social media for language teachers. And what I would like you to do very first thing is to write in the chat box that A, you can see my slide, and B, that you can still hear me. Okay, so everybody right now is saying that it's all good. Might be one person that's not. Kevin. I'm not really sure what to do about that, Kevin, but I am recording the webinar, so if you can't see the slides all the way through, then you will be able to catch the recording afterwards, but at least you can participate. So I'm going to go back to the slides just for myself, and there will be a little bit of lag, as I said, so hopefully it goes well. Oops. Okay, so the reason why I wanted to do this webinar today was because there's a lot of people that I know in my life who are offline. And because I'm the president of TESOL Toronto, I actually meet quite a few language teachers in and around Toronto who either don't really have a great staff room or a great dynamic in their workplace to work from, and or they're not really aware of what's online. But first, a little bit about myself. I am Tyson Seaburn, as I mentioned. I'm an EAP instructor and an academic coordinator for the University of Toronto. And I've been doing language teaching for about 15 years. Really, my particular passion is social media. So although I teach EAP, I do like to delve into social media, and I'm quite heavy in it. And I devote quite a bit of time, a lot of free time to doing it. But that's because I recognize the power of social media and how it has improved me as a teacher and how it has connected me to a lot of different people, both in Toronto but also abroad. So I want you to not necessarily raise your hand in a webinar sense, but maybe in real life you can do it too. If this is what your staff room looks like. Anyone? Anyone? No, I seriously doubt that anybody has this type of staff room, though I think it would be pretty cool if we did. Maybe this one looks a little bit more familiar. This type of staff room, as you can tell, you know, everybody's got a desk. There's a pretty cluttered bookshelf, and right now there's nobody in it. This is sort of what mine looks like, to be honest. Maybe you have a staff room that looks more like this. In this scenario, we have a communal desk where teachers share their resources. Maybe they work together on things, but not everybody has an individual desk. Or maybe you're like this person. This person doesn't have a staff room, and by staff room, of course, I'm talking about a teacher's room. They work primarily from home on either an online platform, or maybe at their school they really just don't have a teacher's room to share resources with and talk about with other teachers. So what I would like you to do in the chat box is think about the staff room that you work in right now, that teacher's room at your school, and I want you to describe it in one word. And do that in the chat box, and I'm going to try to go over and take a look at it. Okay, so we got chaos, distracting, windowless, no staff room, small. Okay, so crowded. So not the most positive of adjectives I've seen before. Anyway, it seems as though I think all of us could agree that we could improve the staff rooms that we work in, or at least there are certain things about the staff room that we could probably change if we could. Well, here's one of my colleagues, not in Canada, but that I've known only online, and she described her staff room in this way. She says that we have a staff room which is too large for my liking, too crowded, and sometimes too permeated with negative energy. I wonder if that sounds a little bit familiar to some of you. I noticed that there's a lot of teachers that complain a lot about their students. I think that's quite natural. There are also teachers who are a little bit possessive about the materials that they have and don't really want to share them, and that can permeate through a staff room and make it a little bit of an unpleasant place to be. Now, Naomi Epstein is a teacher that I know in Israel, and she says that her staff room is so huge that really people don't want to work there. It isn't conducive to working or to really chatting. And she says, when you don't teach, you aren't at school unless there's staff meetings. So that's the type of culture she has in her staff room. And you can imagine that with that type of environment, it's not really that conducive to collegial discussion, professional development, and not a place I'd really want to work in. Vicki Loris is a friend of mine in Switzerland. She says that she will be working in a place with big bookcases full of awesome books, workstations with computers, 2 big photocopiers, and so on. And that actually sounds a little bit more like the place that I work in at the moment, but I haven't always worked in such a great environment. So before I get to talking to you about why social media is useful as a teacher in order to improve really your staff room environment or your staff room feeling, I'd like you to write down any questions in the chat box that you have actually about social media, maybe that you've always been kind of embarrassed to ask, or maybe that you just really don't understand. And I'm going to collect them at the end and try to answer as many of them as I can. And maybe between now and the end of the webinar, actually some of the questions that you write in the chat box will be answered. So I'll give you a second or two just to think about it, and then go to the chat box and write a couple of things, if you have any questions, that is. Okay, so I can see a couple of people putting in a few questions in the chat box, and that's great. I think I might be able to answer some of those things for you during this webinar, and if not, we'll try at the end. Okay, well, while you think about any new questions that you want to ask, keep in mind I'm not going to really be looking at the chat box for most of the rest of the webinar. Let me talk to you a little bit more about social media itself and what its point is. So really for me, social media as a language teacher allows me to connect to people that I wouldn't normally have the opportunity to connect to. Sure, my office environment with the teachers that I work with right now, they're great teachers. We do actually have a great dynamic, but as I said, it hasn't always been that way. And I'm sure for some of you currently and some of you in the past have had environments that really haven't been that great for professional growth. So one key factor of social media is to actually connect you with people that are a little bit more like-minded. And that is represented by that top less photo. Another reason for social media and its benefit is it really helps discussion. It is an excellent platform, no matter which tool you're using in social media. They have benefits and disadvantages to each of them, but no matter which one you're doing, it can create discussion and dialogue about issues that are very, very important to you, and you can find people who also have a shared interest in those types of discussions. And if you might not be able to find them in your staff room, your teacher's room, maybe your teachers are too tired, maybe they run home after work, maybe there's just not enough time. All of these things go away when we're talking about social media, and it's much, much easier to find teachers who want to talk about the issues that are meaningful for you in the classroom and outside of the classroom through social media tools. And then finally, the third main point for social media and using social media as a teacher is really to share resources. There are so many language teachers in the world, and so many of them are on social media that have access to resources and create resources themselves that you may not have access to if you were just looking in your typical bookcase or if you're just talking to your colleague. There's so much out there, and social media is one way that teachers share a lot of things with each other that can help out in the classroom. And I'm going to show you three social media tools which you're going to be very familiar with, at least in terms of name, that help out with these three main characteristics of social media and why teachers should be there. And the first really is blogs. Now, I'm sure we're all familiar with what a blog is. Some of you may actually have blogs of your own. I have a blog. It's 4C. So if you go to fourc.ca, you'll find my blog there. And it's been going for me for about 3 years now. And when I first started blogging, I didn't really understand what the point was. I didn't know that anybody would care what I had to say, and I honestly wasn't that sure if I had much to say. But for me, what happened through blogs, and that's how I started on social media, was I started to reflect on issues that were relevant to me. And when you start talking about something, or when you start writing about something that's important to you, it becomes clearer, right? And you know that, especially on a blog, when you know someone's going to be reading it, or you hope someone's going to be reading it anyway, that you want to be clear and you want to make sure things make sense. So when I started blogging about teacher issues or classroom issues, it really helped clarify a lot of things that I thought, and I didn't really know what I thought until I started blogging. Another thing that blogs do is, once you get a post out there, or even if you don't, you go visit someone else's blog, some other teacher's blog, it initiates a dialogue. As you can see, this is a screen capture of one comment section on my blog, and you can see that what has happened is the post is not visible. It would sort of be above this, but these teachers, Kat, Louise, David, they've all read my post and put a comment on the comment box, and then it's allowed me to reply. Those types of things not only helped me reflect more on the things that I put in the post, but they also initiate a little bit of a dialogue between other teachers who are reading my posts and myself. In blogs, you can also share links, right? So if I find an article that I like, or if I find a resource that I like, I often put it in my blog and make some sort of comment about it. And it can be another way to share links and resources with other teachers. You can inspire other people to do blog posts through what you're posting yourself. One thing that started me off with writing on my blog was blog challenges. And initially I would find a couple of teachers that I like to read, for example, Jeremy Harmer or Scott Thornbury, and they would lead me to other blogs of other teachers around the world that I would eventually like to read as well. And what I noticed was on some of the blogs, they would actually post something and it would challenge you. It would give you a challenge of some sort. And if you're not really sure what to write about, these blog challenges can actually give you some inspiration. And it can be a great way to get a little bit of content started so that you can build a group of people that come and look at your blog as well. And really, ultimately, what is this doing? It's connecting you to other language teachers that are not only in Toronto, but elsewhere around the world. And I think it's really easy to be dismissive, actually, about teachers who are around the world. A lot of people I've talked to have said, oh, well, they don't teach in the same context I do, or they don't teach the same type of learners I teach, or they don't have the same program I have. That's all true on one hand, but language teaching is language teaching. There's some basic principles and there's some context-specific principles, but teachers around the world, they're also teaching learners, in very similar situations, and I think it's valuable to try to connect to them as well, especially if those teachers in your staff room and those that you work with really aren't doing it for you. Now here's another screen capture of my blog, and what you can see is actually I've started to collect blogs in my bookmarks, because as I started going through and reading one teacher blog, they would lead me to another teacher blog, and then another one, and then another one, and eventually there were so many of them that I bookmarked them. And you can see this is an example of all the primary blogs that I read, and it does actually replace a lot of the fiction that I read these days, but it's very inspirational. All these teachers write things that inspire me to think about things that I could use in my classroom, or think about my approach to teaching, or write about on my own blog. All of those things are very great, and it does connect us together. If you're interested and want to find some blogs that you think might be interesting to start reading, I encourage you to go to this link. It's 4c.ca/blogroll, and I've collected some of the blogs there that I typically read, and I would encourage you to go to it and just try them out and see if you can start finding some blogs of teachers that you like to read as well. Now, the one thing that I think is important with blogs is not to be too passive about it. It's very easy to go read a blog and then leave. It's very easy to go to any social media tool and be a lurker or very passive, but you're not going to get the most out of it that way. I really encourage you, if you do go to other people's blogs, do leave a comment, because A, as a writer, it makes you feel good when someone comments on your blog, but B, it's how you start getting to know a person, how you start to connect with another educator by sharing those ideas and being a little bit more personal about it. I wouldn't worry about your identity and all those things. People like people. Just go and try it out. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about Twitter as well. And why Twitter? Well, if you read one of my friend's ideas about Twitter, this is what she thought about it before she had started. So I'll just give you a second to read that over. Okay, now I think what she's saying is something that's quite common about Twitter. Before you use it, or even if you just start using it, you don't really know what it's about, and I think a lot of teachers are intimidated by both Twitter and by Facebook because they hear stories about how it's so superficial, I guess. You follow celebrities, or someone tweets about a concert they're going to, or about the food that they're eating, and all of that stuff is true. Those things do in fact happen, but they can also be used for very powerful reasons in education. And the same woman, Vicki Loris, who wrote the last part, says, if you are an educator and are not on Twitter, I strongly suggest you do it. It will help you in more ways than can be mentioned. And I wholeheartedly agree with her. She and I have known each other for about 3 years, and it is all through Twitter and her blog and my blog. This is how we know each other. We connected on Twitter first, and after we connected through Twitter, that's how I found her blog. That's how she started writing on my blog, how we commented back and forth, and eventually we ended up meeting because I went to a conference in France, and so did she, and of course I knew her. So it may seem remote, and you won't ever meet these people, but you may just meet them. Now, if you're not too familiar with Twitter, or if you've just gone on Twitter, I'm going to introduce you to a little bit of Twitter vocabulary. Obviously, a tweet is the status update that you put. It's what everyone writes on Twitter, and that goes there. So when you first log on to Twitter, you're going to have that compose new Twitter box, and once you write something, it's going to go over to the next column. Obviously, following people is essential on Twitter. You do need to actually find people to follow, and it's very simple. It doesn't mean you're a stalker or anything like that. It's just what people do. It's like friending people on Facebook, basically. But it's people who, in my case, most of them are just professionals. Most of them are educators. I follow primarily language teachers, and that is primarily who follows me. So I use Twitter mostly for professional reasons. And all you need to do in order to follow someone is find that person on Twitter and then click the follow box. As you can see, right at this time, I had a few followers, and it may seem like you'll never get to that point, but the more you interact with people and the more you talk about where you are on Twitter and what your name is on Twitter, and the more you interact with people on Twitter, they'll start following you. As an example, Anna Christina Pradas, Tessel Toronto, Mike Harrison, those are people that I follow. So once they do a status update, once they tweet something, then I see their tweets in that column, just along with mine as well. Now, another thing that you'll see is a mention. A mention is when someone specifically tweets something with your name in it. So as you can see, when Tessel Toronto tweeted, they wrote @Seaburnt, which is my Twitter name, at the beginning of their tweet, or anywhere really in their tweet, and they wrote something directly to me. So when I log on to Twitter, I can see that in my feed, but if I want to see specifically people who have mentioned me in their tweets, then I would move up to that connect button, which is the second from the left at the top, and when I click on that, I can see everyone who's mentioned me in their tweets, and then I can reply to them and so on. The final vocabulary word really that I think is useful for Twitter and in order to get a basic understanding is hashtag. It is the number sign with a word after it, and basically what it does is categorize tweets. It makes them a little bit easier for searching, and people use hashtags in order to make a comment a little bit and categorize whatever it is that they're trying to say. Now, these tweets may end with a hashtag that says a chat that they're talking in, so that all of those tweets are part of that chat, or it may end in with some sort of fun category. In education, largely a lot of people use them to tag tweets that are about specific focuses. So it might be about EAP, and then you would put a hashtag with EAP next to it. So the next time someone searches for EAP, they might find all the tweets that actually have that hashtag on them. Now, what you can see underneath my name is a box that says trends, and this is kind of a useful box. I'm going to mention it just because it's got a kind of neat application for students. But what those words are there are things that appeared in many, many tweets at that particular moment. So as you can see, when I took this screenshot, Lance Armstrong and the Tour de France and so on, he appeared in many, many people's tweets. So I think it was probably around the time that he was caught doing drugs. So what you can see there really is you could click on that word and find all the tweets actually that have Lance Armstrong in them. And how can that be useful for students? Well, I'll talk to you about that in a second. So now that we have some basic Twitter vocabulary, three main principles that I want to tell you about Twitter is you need to follow people and you need to interact with people. If you don't follow anyone, there's no point to being on Twitter because nothing will happen. If no one follows you, there's more of a point because at least you'll be getting other people's tweets and you can see what other educators are saying. But if you tweet something, nobody's going to be seeing what you tweet. So it is really important to kind of have that follower-follow thing going on. And how would you do that? Well, just as an example, when you find someone who you do want to follow and you find them on Twitter, then you would just click that follow button that's underneath their name, and they'll be added automatically. Now, they don't get a notice that says someone's following you. Well, they might actually, but it happens so quickly that I don't even notice when people follow me anymore. So, although you may be stuck sort of looking at how many followers do I have at the beginning, that novelty goes away. Just try not to think of it as stalking, because it really isn't. That's what you're supposed to do. Now, how do you find people to follow? Well, at the top of the Twitter bar, you'll see a little search box, and you can see it on the right side of this screen. I wanted to find Scott Thornbury. I wanted to see if he was part of Twitter. So in that search box, I just typed Scott, and when I did that, a whole bunch of Scott came up, but you can see Scott Thornbury was one of them, and I would just click on his name, and it would take me to a box that looks similar to the one that's just above that on the left, where I could click follow. And then everything that Scott says after that will appear in my Twitter feed, so I'll be able to see it. Now you can search for things that are topics as well. You don't have to search just for people. Now you can't follow topics necessarily, but if I searched for Lance Armstrong, I would get maybe Lance Armstrong's Twitter account show up where Scott Thornbury's is right now, or I might see just a whole bunch of tweets that are about Lance Armstrong. If I wanted to write or find out information about, let's see, Canadian government, I could write something like that in the search box, and then I would see a whole bunch of tweets that actually include those words. So it can be kind of interesting to see what people are talking about or how people are talking about certain topics at this particular moment. Now the third reason to use Twitter really is, same as all social media, is to share resources. And for me, Twitter has been the #1 place that I've found resources for language teaching, because once I started following a bunch of people that I trusted, or people that consistently tweeted different blog posts or tweeted different resources or links to articles, my Twitter feed, which is where I see everyone's status, was full and full and full of different resources that I could click on. Now, it can get a little bit overwhelming if you're following lots and lots and lots of people, so you might want to start out kind of small, but it is really one of the #1 ways where people share resources and share links to resources. Now, there is a kind of etiquette for Twitter, and I just put that at the bottom of this screen. So if you go to that website, you will find a little bit of information about kind of things you might want to avoid doing on Twitter, things that you might want to try doing on Twitter just to kind of be polite, because of course Twitter itself is a kind of culture, and it has morphed and evolved over the last 5 or 6 years. So people have sort of figured out how they like to interact on Twitter. And if you're a little bit worried about how to do that, you might want to go there and just check it out. A couple of suggestions that came to my mind for why Twitter is good for also students, and I'm not really focusing on students in this webinar, but I thought you might like to know. What I do with students is I find a bunch of Twitter accounts that I think students would like to follow. Now in my case, my students are University of Toronto students, and almost every department and office at University of Toronto has a Twitter account. So I found a whole bunch of them, and I passed them on to my students. So when my students join Twitter, which I encourage them to do, because I do communicate from time to time with them through Twitter, I suggest to them different accounts that they can follow at U of T. And once they do that, they can get a whole bunch of information about maybe their future courses or what it's like to live on campus. I also put a bunch of accounts like CBC or different Toronto area Twitter accounts just so that they can know what's going on in the city. But you could also do that for a whole bunch of different Twitter accounts, because almost every company, almost every, well, person in a sense has a Twitter account, and you might be able to find things that are really, really useful for your students to get quick information. A couple of activities that I thought were useful for students was, number one, eliminating wordiness. With Twitter, you only have 140 characters to write a tweet in, so by definition, your tweets have to be concise. And if your students are very, very wordy and you want them to write something that is quite concise, Twitter might be a good way to practice that, because it won't let you tweet unless you're within that 140 character limit. Two, if you want to try out using a hashtag, you could try doing a group story with your students, where students write one sentence of a story, and then the next student adds another sentence to that story, and so on, that typical classroom activity. But now you can take it outside of the classroom as well and have students do it at their leisure, maybe over a session, and see what kind of story really develops over that time, and just add a hashtag to it, like Tyson's class or something like that. Then when you search for Tyson's class hashtag, you'll see the whole story put together. Now, I mentioned trends. Trends is a great way to figure out what people are talking about at this very moment. So using that trends column on Twitter can maybe be useful to spark some discussion or help students figure out what really is going on in their environment where they're living. And then finally, a good thing is, the corpus. People like corpuses. Teachers like corpora, I guess. And of course, what that is how do people actually use the language? Well, Twitter is real-time language use. So yeah, it might not be perfect, and it might not be things that you want your students necessarily always exposed to, but it can be an interesting way to find out how people are using a particular word. So in the search box of Twitter, what you could do is write in a word such as look, and what will happen is you'll see all of the tweets that include the word look come up very suddenly, and you'll see how people are using it around the world at this very moment. And if you want more information about a couple of other ideas to use with Twitter, I've put a website there that is a blog post I did about using Twitter. Now, one of the best ways to get started using Twitter, in my opinion, beyond sharing just resources and trying to follow people, is Twitter chats. They're very common on Twitter, and what they are is 60-minute discussions, basically, that happen on Twitter. They're categorized by adding a hashtag to your tweets, and it is a chance for you and other like-minded teachers to regularly connect and talk about focused topics on Twitter. Now, it can be a little bit fast-paced depending on the chat that you choose to join, but there's a wide variety of chats on a wide variety of topics and a wide variety of contexts. And surely there's one that you might be able to join, and even if you don't participate initially, you will be able to find people that you can follow because you'll see their tweets just by searching for a particular hashtag, and you might just lurk for a little while and see what they're talking about. Just as an example, one of the biggest ones happens on Wednesdays, so at 7 and 4 o'clock our time, at 12 p.m., 9 p.m. UK, and their most recent topic was how to use a great resource like ELT picks for your teaching. And what teachers did was they came onto Twitter and they talked about how they use images in the classroom. On the first and third Mondays of every month is EAP chat, and it happens at 9 o'clock or 3 o'clock Toronto time, or 2 and 8 o'clock UK time, and we talked about, is reading research important for teachers? And if you go to Twitter, you'll be able to search for EAP chat in the search box, and you'll see that discussion that actually happened. Again, on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Toronto time is new teacher chat. And if you're a teacher that hasn't been teaching very long and doesn't really have a mentor teacher around them, it can be a great way to connect with other new teachers, but also teachers who join in that chat to help give advice. And their most recent topic was long-range plans. So what do you want to do in your career as a language teacher? What did people like me, who's been doing it for 15 years, expect to do? Is there really a career out there for language teachers?
So it's a great way to get support from other people who are in similar situations to you. So again, if I wanted to look for ELT chat tweets, right, just to see what people talked about last week and maybe prepare myself for trying it out next week, I would go up to that search box at the top and I would type the hashtag or the number sign and then type ELT chat. And what will come up right below it is all of the tweets that have that hashtag ELT chat on it. And you'll see exactly the topic that we were just looking at. So I encourage you, when you have a chance and you're joining Twitter, do a little bit of searching around. It's not really that intimidating. All you need to do really is look for topics and look for people and start following them and give one of these chats a try. And just so you have a little bit of information about what type of chats already exist, here are some. Now, I've already told you that ELT chat at the top left there, that's English language teaching chat. So it covers a wide variety of language teaching issues. And the next one over is new teacher chat. So there's not only language teachers there, there's also mainstream teachers. But it is for new teachers who need a little bit of support. And then on the top right is EAP chat. That's one that I moderate, and it's for English for academic purposes. So that's what we talk about, is those types of topics. But the next two rows, maybe in the chat box you could do a quick guessing game as to what these chats mean. Any guess? So I just did one for you. ELT chat equals English language teaching chat. What do you think those other ones mean? Yeah, flipped chat is flipped classroom chat. So if you're interested in the approach to teaching, which is flipped classroom, there's a whole chat about that. People go on and they talk about their experiences flipping the classroom. And if you don't really know what flipping the classroom is, you might Google it in order to get a basic background understanding of what it is. The bottom right one, Svetlana, your right, is Canadian Education Chat. So if you're an educator in Canada, and we are, many of us, you might actually go and search for that one and see what people are talking about. Celt, yes. Chris, that one is Korea ELT Chat. So little did I know when I was in Korea, actually Twitter didn't exist back then, but little did I know that there's such a community actually in Korea of language teachers. The other ones, just so for your information, ELL chat is English Language Learners Chat. So your students should join that one. That is a place where students can talk, and there's often teachers there as well that can guide the discussion, get students to practice their English in a Twitter environment. The bottom left one is EdChat. That is probably the first one. The first Twitter chat that ever existed, and it's just about education in general, but it is probably the widest and most popular. And then in the middle we have Lang Chat, and that is one where I've seen people talk about language issues. So if you have questions or you have something that's a little bit unclear about grammar, for example, you might go to that chat and talk about, present perfect, for an hour. So they can be great ways to connect with other educators that you might not normally connect with, people who you really could have in your staff room to talk to, but for some reason or other you don't, and they're about very focused things. So it can be a little bit daunting at first to take a look at this type of chat thing, but do give Twitter a try. It is really one of the most powerful places on the net for language teachers to connect with other language teachers, and lots of resources. And it can really increase your staff room experience to either no staff room, a little staff room where people don't talk too much, to something wide, wide open where anything's a possibility, and that's my experience. Now the next social media tool, all of us, or not all of us, but many of us are on already, and all of us at least have heard about, is Facebook. Now I want to talk about it, and I'm going to
tell you from my experience how I used Facebook first. Originally, I used Facebook simply for personal reasons. So I connected only with friends I knew who were in my physical life, my in real life, you might say. I connected with family members. It was a way for me to upload photos and keep in touch with those people. And then I realized actually that Facebook is much bigger than that. And even compared to Twitter, there are more people in the world on Facebook. So there is a lot more opportunity actually to connect with more educators, more language teachers who have similar goals or things to talk about as I do. Now, I primarily use Twitter as my professional account, and that's where I shared most things in conjunction with my blog. And then I started to, as I said, realize that Facebook is this place where I need to actually connect with educators as well. But I didn't really want to move my Facebook into a blurred line between professional and personal. So what I've done is you don't have to friend people you don't know on Facebook in order to connect to them. Still, what I do is I connect. Most of my friends on Facebook are still really people I've met in person or people that I've had a lot of discussion with, or my family. And those are the people that I friend on Facebook most of the time. You don't have to friend everyone in the whole world in order to talk to them. And so how do you do that? Well, there's really two basic ways once you're on Facebook as a person, not a page or a company, but as a person, and you have a personal account, is to look and search for pages or groups on Facebook. And the difference between those two things are pages basically are not so interactive. They're often put up by a company or an organization. As you can see on the left, that's a page of TESOL Toronto, which is one that I manage. And as an organization, it's just a way for us to get information to our members or people that like that page more quickly than having to put it on the website or email all the time. But there honestly isn't a whole lot of interaction that goes on this page. However, if you want to connect with other people on Facebook, you really do just need to type in the search box for any organization that you're looking for. So if you type TESOL Toronto in the search box, you'll get to this page, and if you just like it, then you'll start to be able to go to that page and put posts on that page and see other people that are on that page as well. You don't have to friend any of those people. Now, if you want to actually talk a lot more to people on Facebook, to other educators who are not your friends, you might actually search for groups. What you can see on the right side is a group called ELT Chat, and what I hope you're going to start to take away is that there are many different ways to connect with educators that actually cross platforms. So ELT Chat is something that started on Twitter. It's now got its own Facebook group, and you can join that group. And all you need to do is search for ELT Chat when you're in Facebook. You'll get to this page here, and you'll click on Join Group, which is at the top right underneath that woman's photo. And they'll either allow you to join or not. Most likely they will until you spam them. And what happens with that group is, instead of it being sort of one company putting out information to you, it tends to be all of the people that are members of that group post things on the front page, and people comment about them and ask questions and so on. So it can be a pretty interactive way to not only connect with other educators and talk about issues, but keep your Facebook private and personal itself so that you don't have to keep friending everybody. So just by comparison, I have about 200 friends on Facebook, but when someone requests to be my friend, I have no problem with ignoring it or saying no or declining whatever it is if I've never actually had a conversation with that person. So you don't have to feel awkward and you don't have to feel weird about declining those friend requests, and you don't actually yourself have to go and seek out to be friends with someone that you're not actually friends with or that you've never really talked to. You can use Facebook pages and you can use Facebook groups simply by searching for them in the search box in order to find those educators and people that you don't want to be friends with on Facebook but you do actually want to talk to. Yep. So as an example, if you look at the left side, I've taken this screen capture of a Facebook group conversation, and it was from IATEFL, I think, which is a big language teaching conference or organization in the UK. And the people who are part of that, you know, what did they do? Gabrielle wrote basically a question about business English. How do you measure progress with ongoing company classes? And what happened? Well, as you can see below that, people started commenting about their own experience with business English. And people that she is not friends with, not necessarily, started giving her ideas. And if you want to be friends with that person after you start making discussions with them, you can always friend them. But it's a great way in groups to start a conversation by a question, and then people just comment and give their ideas. And most groups that I'm a part of, that I found just randomly by searching English language teaching, for example, in the search box, most people are very, very friendly, and you know, they like to help. Now below that one you can see TESOL Toronto. Another thing that we do on Facebook is TESOL Toronto creates event pages, and any organization can create an event page. So as an example, whenever we have a TESOL Toronto event like the pub night that we had, or this webinar in fact, we create an event page on our Facebook page, and that gives me an opportunity to invite people to go to the event. They get a little reminder if they say they're going. They get a reminder on Facebook so that they can see that the webinar is coming up. They can talk to other people that are going to go to that event. I can share information on that event page. Again, a nice way to start a little bit of networking. And then another thing that happens on pages, like on the right column, 4C and ELT, that's my page. All I did was I posted a status on that page about how I thought course books were a little bit strange for programs to adopt, and how teachers still like course books and so on. Anyway, what happened was people who had liked my page just started randomly commenting. So one of my friends, Rana, she started talking, and Karen started talking, and then I could reply back and forth. So there's a nice interaction that goes on with people on Facebook that A, I'm not necessarily friends with, and B, they're people who have something to say and something interesting to talk about with regards to language teaching that I may not get in my staff room, and maybe you don't either. Now there are some Facebook groups that maybe you want to join immediately in case you have no idea what to join. Language teaching organizations typically have Facebook groups. So TESOL Toronto does, TESOL Ontario has one, IATEFL has one, and you can find them pretty easily just by searching them in the search box. There are interest groups as well, so if you searched for all things TESOL, it's a pretty big Facebook group where people talk about, you know, anything to do with teaching English. ELT Chat has one. If you're interested in technology, you might try Eurocall. But basically, if you find something online on one social media platform, it probably exists on another one as well. So if you're not on Twitter and you're still a little bit scared of going on that, even though you shouldn't be, you are on Facebook, you might be able to find that group on Facebook as well. Now the last thing that I want to talk to you about before the webinar ends today is how do you find images to use in your classroom. And what I mean is sometimes we want to project images on a screen, sometimes we want to photocopy images, and increasingly we have these two issues. We have on the left, you have your magnifying glass. That means that it's very difficult and it can be quite challenging to find exactly the right image that you want to find. Even if you use Google Images, you might, like me, search through 6 or 7 pages before I find something that I want, and I might not find one at all. And then on the right side, we have our infamous copyright problem that permeates our industry. We're not allowed to photocopy this or that. We're not allowed to take images off Google Images and use them on our handouts. And increasing that's becoming more and more of an issue. So social media is actually a great way to find photos and images for your handouts or for your class in any way that you use them. And that is through something I mentioned earlier, which was eltpics.com. ELTpics was a group actually on Twitter that started with just a simple hashtag, and it was the result of language teachers saying, you know what, because of copyright and because I couldn't find the images that I want, why don't we just start our own image database? So language teachers started taking photos and sort of donating them to the language teaching community free of charge. So if I have a photo of a tree and you don't have a photo of a tree and I put it on ELTpics, then you can use the photo of the tree. And what's really cool about this is it is crowdsourced, which is really one of the number one things about social media, is that you are connecting with other educators and you are pooling your resources together. Now ELTpics has three parts to it. If you go to the website, there's Take a Photo and, which is a kind of blog, and you take a photo and you talk about how you would use that photo with your classroom. There's ELTpics itself, which is a whole photo set of crowdsourced language teaching related photos that you can use in your classroom. And then there's the Burning Question, which is another blog where the people who organize ELTpics ask a question and challenge you to find an image or something to answer that question. Something related to language teaching, obviously. The part that I use the most, and most people I think use the most, is the actual ELT photo site itself, ELTpics. And this is what it looks like. If you go to their website and you click on ELTpics, you'll be taken to their Flickr page. And as you can see, as of October 2010, there are 93 sets of pictures. And the good people there who organize this basically take all of the topics that they want to use and tweet it out to everybody, and they put it on Facebook. And if you have something that fits that topic, then you can just upload it to Facebook, their Facebook page, or you can upload it to Twitter and just use the hashtag of that particular week and ELTpics, and they will take the photo and upload it to their site. So what you can see as an example are lines and shapes. That's one photo set. So if you're looking for some photos in order to introduce how to describe different shapes to your students, you might click on that photo set and you'll see like 174 authentic photos by language teachers all the way around the world that all include lines and shapes. And you can see we have food issues, animals, appearance, arts and crafts, and so on. And this is the power of social media. It is crowdsourcing. It is getting a whole bunch of people together and having them share the resources together. If I personally wanted to make a handout and I needed to go out and take a photo of every single thing that I wanted in that handout on a particular topic, it might take me a long time and I might not actually get the photos that I want. But if 1,000 teachers are all doing that together, then we get lots and lots and lots of choice and lots of variety. And you're free to use any of these photos on anything that you do, including your blogs or your website or your handouts, as long as you credit that person and you're not making money from it. So, power of social media. So really, I'm going to end off this webinar by suggesting that Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, all of those different things, they all have great ability to connect language teachers together, and a lot of them are really cross-platform. People who are on Twitter are typically on Facebook. Groups that are on Twitter are typically on Facebook. And if you're not on one and you're on the other one, you might just try finding those groups and those educators on that particular platform to connect with. And why bother using social media? Well, I really hope that through my rambling over this last hour, A, you haven't gotten bored, and B, you've come to realize that really it is a way just to make your staff room experience, and I don't mean your physical staff room, but your online staff room, someplace that you're actually on a lot of times anyway, like me, something a little bit more global. So if you're not getting what you need, you're not professionally growing, you're not having the discussions you want to have, you're not getting the support you want to have in your actual staff room, there is a plethora of educators who are just like you online on Twitter and Facebook and blogs, and they are very supportive and they can help you, and they can find resources as well. So I really encourage you, try out social media, don't be afraid, and thank you very much. Now, having said that, I will come back to video and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, so hello. Now, a while ago I asked you to write in any questions that you had in the chat box, and I noticed a couple of them. So I'm not sure if I actually answered them, but it looks as though there was a great deal of discussion in the chat box while I was talking, which is great. So Anna, you mentioned a long while ago actually, does Twitter still work for you? I think there's a lot of teachers actually that used to be on Twitter, and there's kind of a new generation of people on Twitter. I don't use Twitter quite as much as I used to, and that is largely because I figured out how it works best for me. I've realized that I don't need to actually sit there and have conversations on Twitter, because that happens really the best during a Twitter chat. And I follow so many people now, and so many people follow me, that it can be really hard to have a lengthy conversation with one particular person. But it is a great place still for me to advertise blog posts that I do, to try to get people to come to my blog and interact with me on my blog about a particular topic. It's still a great place for me to find out about events and other blog posts and articles and things like that that people were unable, or that I wouldn't have exposure to, that whole crowdsourcing thing. But I don't spend as much time on it as I used to. What do I tell teachers who have never used social media? That's Benjamin. I don't actually tell them very much. I invite them to webinars like this, and I really try to show through example, to be honest. So I'll talk about social media as though it's just a normal part of my daily life, and I'll talk about the things that I get from Twitter and the things that I get from educators on Facebook, and I'll share blog posts, maybe through email even, with the teachers whom I work with. And hopefully through some example and some osmosis, in a sense, they might try it out. But I don't really want to be too preachy about it. I want them to really figure it out on their own, and I'll be there to help them. And if someone is totally against social media and they're not going to use it for language teaching purposes, there's very little that I can do, probably to convince them to do it. Anything else that I missed? How does one host a webinar? Well, how did I start hosting webinars? This particular community that I'm part of right now is Webheads, and I have to thank them for really having a webinar room in which we can borrow and use from time to time. Vance Stevens has been great about sharing his webinar room, and for us, it's not something that costs money, but a lot of webinar rooms do actually cost money. So if you're an individual, it can be a little bit challenging to find a webinar room to use on your own. And you might be able to use Webheads, I don't really know. But it's something that came out of social media for me. I, like you, maybe didn't know anybody who had webinar rooms. And through several years of me going to webinars and eventually connecting with people that I talked to in the chat box and started talking to people on different blogs and seeing who was kind of in control of what type of webinar room and who did different conferences and so on, I started to connect with those educators who actually have these types of resources. And for me, Vance Stevens was one of them. And through social media, really, I just basically asked, does anybody have a webinar room that I can borrow? And eventually someone came through for me. But in terms of presenting online, what you might try to do is actually go to a webinar, an online conference and submit a proposal, much like you would do at a normal offline conference. And then someone already has the webinar room ready. Then someone can just approve or tell you when you're going to present, and that might be the best way to start out. So I see a few questions about, or not questions, but comments about the webinar. I really appreciate all of you who attended and in this chat box have been sharing links and so on. That is social media right at its finest. So I think I will stop the webinar recording now, and I will thank everybody for coming. I will put the recording of this webinar on TESOLToronto.org in the next few days, and you can pass it along to anybody you want, and hopefully they'll watch it and be swayed a little bit to try out social media as well. So thank you very much for coming. I hope you have a very good weekend, and I'll see you later. Thanks very much.
Recording stopped.